Hello, everyone. I'm Jay Hobbs. I am a long-term care administrator licensed since 2008. And so I just wanted to say, I want you to just sit back and kind of relax, take in some of the information that I give you. The topic is communication is key. If you attended last month on February the 1st, David O'Connor, a licensed nursing facility administrator, did a great job about talking about emergency preparedness for long-term care facilities. And so he was reviewing more of the regulatory. What I will be doing with you today is giving you a few scenarios, things that I've gone through, and trying to put the modules, if you think of all the modules that are out there, direction and control is one that takes a lot of communication. Warning takes a lot of communication. And the third core part of your emergency preparedness plan, as outlined last month by David, is communication. So we'll be talking about communication is key. Next slide. Some of the objectives that I want to go over on the next slide is identify the importance of that core function, number 3, as it relates to communication. Also, to give you a little bit of information, we all have to do it if you're involved with this, is tabletop exercises and collaborating with others to do even drills and exercises that are live. So I would provide a little bit of information about that. And then we're going to talk about how communication relates to after action reports. So knowledge is power. So as I go through this presentation, I want you to think about knowledge being the power. So you've got your emergency preparedness plan, you've got everything in order, you follow the directions, but then who also has the knowledge about that emergency preparedness plan? So knowledge is power, communication is key. So many of you may have emergency preparedness plans that start out like this. Notification and warning. Call administrator or the director of nurses or designee. If needed, emergency call list will be initiated. And the emergency call list is located next to each nurse's work area. Primary form of communication will be landlines. How many of you still have landlines? Secondary will be cell phone use. Conditions, natural or otherwise, shall be monitored through local television and or NOAA radios. So as you listen to that and listen to my presentation, try to key in where are we communicating, and then we'll talk about who are we communicating with. Communication is that primary method of communicating with residents, family members, and others that may be what we would call your targeted audience. Okay, so again, in your emergency preparedness plan, you will have outlined all of this. In case of a potential or actual complete evacuation, the incident commander or designee will notify receiving facilities according to your transfer agreements. So again, through this flows communication. Many of you know and use other communication tools or platforms instead of getting that list, which I have done, where you start calling every responsible party that we're having an incident. The electricity's out. The heating and air conditioning is out. So these are some common things that would probably on a scale require you to activate your incident response plan. So many of you may be using VoiceFriend, which is now Icon or Everbridge or LifeLoop or WorkVivo. And these are some great tools for you to get that communication out to that stakeholder, which is the family, the responsible party, as well as your employees. Keep in mind, your employees are also considered part of your stakeholders. So plan for all possible disruptions of your regular means of communications. So here we got an electrical storm, and in that electrical storm, all of your total communication failure happens. So you lose your landlines. So you go to cell phones. You will probably also need to consider backup systems such as satellite phones or walkie-talkie radios. And again, the last resort may that you would have runners that go out and do, get you information or get information to certain people, staff, and things like that. So next slide. Why is communication important during a disaster? Okay. When an incident's occurred, having effective communication plan and procedures in place plays a vital role in the effectiveness of a senior living facility. Communication plans are especially important when actively managing a situation and assessing where things stand at a given point in time, and as well as exchanging information. Good communication will help build good relationships between your families, between staff members. These relationships are important to carry on that effectiveness of your plan as you go through the incident. How do you contact first responders? Who is the person assigned to call 911? How do you warn staff of danger? How do you ensure communication to families that residents are safe? Do you have a call tree? Who will notify HHSC, Health and Human Services Commission? What if there is property damage to the facility? Who will notify HHS regional office? So those are some things to consider. Next slide. So what we're going to talk about now is communication during any type of incident is important to minimize those disruptions. Stop the spread of that misinformation among employees and other stakeholders. When you don't provide information out there, that's where you're going to run into problems where they will start making things up and rumors will start happening, and the event will probably get bigger than it really is. Ensuring that your employees have that accurate information. Again, you could use one of the platforms that we talked about in order to get messaging out. But some campuses may not have that luxury, and you have to resort to using telephones. Provide information on steps to take to keep employees and residents safe, and then protect your community's reputation by your ability to control that message. And so all of these are some things that are important for us to consider in order to have a good communication plan. One of the things that we did as a team is we had a tabletop session. So next slide, sorry about that. So you have a tabletop drill. When I worked for a life plan community out in West Texas, we did a tabletop exercise. And that exercise was just to go down our call tree. So we set up in a conference room, and in the conference room, you're again able to practice your responses, practice your strategies. So here we are sitting and we had the scenario laid out, and you can get a lot of these off of the internet and will help you go through step by step what to do in a tabletop exercise. Once you're in that setting, and we started the process of just starting to call people down the tree. We discovered in real time that we had a lot of issues that we had not considered. And it was very confusing. So we had to go back in and rewrite and really work on that. So I'd encourage you to take the time, and I think a lot of times we think we just don't have time. Our rat race of a busy day, handling all of the things that you do in a nursing home, sometimes you just don't think you have the time to sit down and do what is necessary. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, things. So now let's talk about pot wash. And that's what one of my colleagues called it, the pot wash. You know, after the incident has happened, and I'll tell you about an incident that happened to us in this West Texas campus. After the August 31st Midland, Odessa shooting in 2019 involving a gunman shooting multiple people from a vehicle. 8 people were killed, including the perpetrator, and 25 people were injured, including 3 police officers. This was on a Saturday, and our community was having an annual event that we usually have called Taste of Texas fundraiser. Word got around, residents were also had their scanners and radios, and they started coming to the event and announcing that there was a gunman loose and there was a shooting. And so we had to act fast. Luckily, as an administrator, I was there, and I was able to call some of my key people that were on the incident command team in order to inform them what we were going to do. And so about 2 weeks later, after this incident, and everything was controlled, but the gunman was about 2.5 miles away from us. And when you're hearing he's going here, he's going here, he's coming down this street, that was the street that our campus was on. So it was very alarming that if he was to make one turn off of a street, he would be on our campus, and the only way out would be to come back and go back through that same gate. So we were very, very cautious and very alarmed by the situation. Again, communication was key. After it was all over, all of our residents were very thankful in the way that we responded. We're 96 acres, so it was a lot of area to cover in order to get that message out. And this was pre us having any kind of a platform where we could do telephone notifications or email notifications. About 2 weeks later, we were invited to attend our Border RAC Regional Advisory Council Coalition in an actual after action plan. It was amazing to watch participants learn as the police and other entities discussed what they had gone through and what they could have done better. And, you know, tensions rose in this meeting, but everyone knew that it was very good for us to have these conversations in order to do better the next time. And so I would encourage all of us to continue to have after action reports. So what we're going to do is go through some of the steps. So I've gotten a template, and in my resource page, you'll see where you can get one exactly like this. So next slide will show us a little bit about things that we need to do. So the after action report, and again, when we were in the Border RAC Regional Advisory Coalition team meeting, and this was held actually in the clubhouse on our campus, but there were agencies from all over that area that convened in this space in order to do what you're actually seeing here. What was expected to occur when this happened? Was this event predicted? How much notice did you get that something was going to happen? Were there previous plans or strategies intended for an event like this shooter? What resources were available to you before the event, and who was responsible during this kind of event? One of the things that came out of this is that the city did not notify our campus or any other long-term care facility that was in the area. And so that was just a good piece that came out that they, committed to start doing. Next slide. Okay, communication, incident review. So this team met for like 3 hours, and they did go chronologically in order of the events and the timeline. Who was there and within reach, who responded, what did they do, what resources were used, and who communicated and what were they told. All of this was valuable information to actually hear these teams and different entities and different agencies, from the ambulance service to the police officer, who was hearing what on the radio, what could they have done better, and what could they have done differently, was communicated in this section of the review, the pot wash. Next slide. Then what you're going to do is you're going to analyze and make some analysis. So who on the response team was most helpful? One of the things that we learned in a live incident that we had on campus is that some folks that were identified to be on the team, and we had all, as a campus, committed for 10 people that were on the safety committee team to go through the FEMA training. And so we went through this FEMA training, and it was at that time that we did 5 different modules. Once we had this incident, which involved a gas leak, other leaders emerged that we were surprised to find how quickly and responsive and how well they communicated during that particular incident, that they were actually then, I guess you could say, promoted to incident commander. And so always be aware that your title may be licensed nursing facility administrator, but you or myself may not have the ability to carry through in a live incident, and it may be your maintenance director. It may be your human resource director. So that was a good lesson for us to learn as we did our pot wash. What strategies proved most effective? What resources proved most useful? And what were the most positive responses from employees as far as our communication that we were doing? And what new in the moment actions were effective? And what technology was most useful? Again, we were very thankful. The pandemic, as you know, was considered an incident that we had to respond to, an emergency. And as you all know, we had to do a lot of work on our emergency preparedness plan related to a pandemic. And so at that point, we were able to enhance our technology in order to communicate better with our employees as well as our other stakeholders. Next slide. And then you go into that phase where, what did we do? What can we do better? Always during these sessions, recommend discussion and questions. And it is to have guidelines for how the meeting will go, who will facilitate, how can you get high involvement into these meetings, who did not meet expectations. And again, going back to the shooting of 2019 in that area, and going to their response after meeting, it was very much, you could hear that them talking about those that did not meet expectations. But what strategies proved to be least effective? What strategies proved to be the best? What resources proved to be the least useful? What was a negative response from employees or other stakeholders? So again, going through this process only helps you to get better at what you do. If you think about it like learning how to communicate effectively is a never-ending task. And because every person and every situation presents a unique challenge to achieve that authentic communication between two different entities. Next slide. And then be sure and list your action items. It's very good to make sure that those action items are written down. And what may seem dumb to someone, write it down anyway. Because a lot of times, if you take these action steps out and start communicating with others that are perhaps not on the incident command team, you will start to see that they have ideas and they have suggestions that will be quite helpful. So the next slide shows that you have to keep it moving. Once you put together your after action report, it is time to implement this. After all, the best plan is useless if you don't follow it. And here are 3 different ways that you can do that. Assign action items. Find the best person to implement any changes, get any new resources, get people involved. Make sure to clearly explain what needs to be done and why. Then set a timeline, clear deadline of when you want each action item to be done, and be sure to communicate this timeline to all relevant stakeholders. And again, I want to emphasize, we did some drills that were just simple fire drills. We've identified that the fire alarm would go off and people were not responding. They would say things like, oh, it's probably maintenance. Oh, it's probably someone working on the fire system. Oh, I think they're having maintenance is, never were they just doing what they needed to do. So we actually had a small team, a fire committee, subcommittee, that went out and told the participants, tomorrow we're having a fire drill, but we want you to react, and this is how we want you to react. All in time infusing that reality that most of the time you're not responding, and they agreed. So make sure to take action when you get those action items, set a timeline, and then check in regularly to see how it's going. But again, the importance is knowing that you're making a difference whenever you are reviewing, setting up some simple action plans, achievable goals, measurable goals, and get them done so you can see that progress is being made as you move forward. I think that is the end of my presentation. Yeah, here's some resources and that one was alertmedia.com with the tabletop exercises. And then these other ones are from HHSC on our emergency preparedness plan.